started. Okay, Eretz Tov. So tonight's Jewish history class is going to take a little detour tonight. I don't think it'll go into next week. Hopefully, it'll go through it tonight. We have been dealing with the early days of Zionism. We talked about political Zionism. We talked about people who looked at the land of Israel as not necessarily the only option for a homeland for the Jews. We started talking about the religious Zionism. Noted that the word Mizrahi comes from the words Merkaz Ruchani, or religious center or spiritual center. And as a result of the fact there were different religious approaches to the whole idea of what would become known as making Aliyah, and we're talking now about the first waves of Aliyah in the 1800s, there was a debate, because Jews are good at that, of having differences of opinion. By the way, there's nothing wrong with debate. There's nothing wrong with having differences of opinion, and it can be polar opposite opinions, and that's fine. Just open the Gemara, and pretty much any page of the Gemara, you're going to see that's going to happen. But because it is a similar series of arguments on either side of the fence, whether you should make Aliyah, you should not allowed to make Aliyah, you can, you don't have to, whatever it might be, those debates were already going on in the 1800s. And I wanted to share that a shiur with you. It's one I've given before over the last many years, but it's really good, worth repeating. It's based on something I learned or I came across, and I just modified it for my own use. But in order to understand part of it, I'm going to jump into just explain a couple of words first. Move everybody over. Okay. So, and I told before some of you came on, I said that basically almost every screen tonight is going to be in Hebrew, but I will read and translate because I need to deal with the Makorot, or the sources. You can divide mitzvot into many, many categories. They're the mitzvot taseh, mitzvot that you have to do. Mitzvot lo taseh, the things you're not allowed to do. Mitzvot that have to do with the time of the Beit HaMikdash, and on and on and on. But there's another way to classify all of mitzvot. That's called a mitzvah kiyumit and a mitzvah chiyuvit. A mitzvah chiyuvit, I'll explain first, the one on the bottom here. It's a mitzvah you have to do. For example, a guy has to put on tefillin when he reaches bar mitzvah. We have to keep Shabbat. It's not if something happens, then we keep Shabbat. And all those mitzvot that we have to keep. There is no mitzvah to build a house that has a doorway requiring a mezuzah. But if you build a house or move into a house or an apartment that has a doorway, then you have to put up a mezuzah, and that's called mitzvah kiyumit. When certain conditions are met, then you have to do the mitzvah. One of the big, and we'll come across this a little bit, one of the big debates is if Aliyah is a mitzvah, that's Aleph, if it's considered a mitzvah nowadays, and if it is, what kind of mitzvah? Is it chiyuvit, meaning everyone has to make Aliyah, or is it kiyumit? If you're living in Chutz La'aretz, outside Israel, you don't have to move. But if you do, and you make Aliyah, then you're mekayim the mitzvah. Then you're doing the mitzvah of Aliyah. So those two terms are going to come up a little bit here and there. And what I want to do is to put on the screen some sources. We're going to look at this topic of Mitzvat Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, and we're going to, it'd be helpful if I shared it. I'm only guessing. Because I just opened it on my screen. You don't see it. And there we go. Okay. You should see on your screen now in Hebrew, Mitzvat Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, with the word negative in the middle of the screen on the top here. The first thing I want to do is go through some of the arguments that have been made over the many last couple of centuries, especially nowadays, that are made. And it would seem, if you just look at this, that not only is it not a mitzvah nowadays, but you really shouldn't make Aliyah. So and the reason I'm mentioning these is that you need to know what the, quote, other side is saying. What I have found is, over the years, is that people who maybe not be the most learned suddenly have this amazing knowledge in why they're not supposed to make Aliyah. We have to wait for Mashiach because of the Gemara and Ketubot, which we're going to look at, and the Rabbeinu Chaim, which we're going to look at. All of a sudden, they know all these quotes from all over the place, either taken out of context or don't apply anymore. So let's jump right into it. There's a Gemara. This is probably the most famous most commonly quoted Gemara when it comes to why a person should not make Aliyah, and that's a Gemara in Mesechet Ketubot and Daf Kuf Yud Amud Bet. It says as follows: Tanu Rabbanan, Hu Omer La'alot. Husband and wife are having a disagreement. He wants to make Aliyah. He Omer Shelo La'alot, and she says, "Nope, not chance. I'm not making Aliyah." Kofino Tal La'alot. We can force her to make Aliyah. V'im Lav, and if she doesn't agree, they can get divorced, and he does not owe the payment of the ketubah. Flip side, he omeret la'alot. She wants to make aliyah. Omer shelo la'alot, and he says, "Nope, I'm staying in chutz la'aretz." Kofinoto la'alot. We can force him to make aliyah. V'im lav. If not, then he doesn't go. Yotzi, has to give her a divorce. V'yitain ketubah, and he has to pay her monetary compensation based on the ketubah. Along comes the Tosfot. So it sounds like, wow, yeah, no brainer. Aliyah, top of the list, you make Aliyah. Not so fast. Tosfot, commentary says on the Gemara, Omrim shedin ze eino noheg hayom. There are those who say that this rule of you force the other party to make Aliyah does not exist today. Mipnei sheyesh sakanat drachim. Because there's danger in travel. And then when after these people quote this Tosfot that says this doesn't apply nowadays, they quote Rabbeinu Chaim. In that Tosfot, Rabbeinu Chaim says as follows: Haya Omer Rabbeinu Chaim, Da'achshav eino mitzvah ladur be'eretz Yisrael. Nowadays, and listen to this, b'chilat kvodo, it's hard for me to say this, warped logic of this individual, and we're going to see later if it gets thrown out the window. He says that it's no mitzvah nowadays. He's talking about say 1,000 years ago. There's no mitzvah. It's actually a little less. No mitzvah to live in Israel. Why? The first one is very difficult to swallow. Because there are a lot of mitzvot that we can only do in Israel. Shemitah, Trumot Masrot, Orla. Well, that's just outside of Israel. And when you mess them up, there's a lot of repercussions. There's, quote, punishments for that. We can't do it all. It's just too much. Now, this wasn't some guy sitting in a pub making this statement. This is one of the Balei Tosafot, maybe, who made this statement. One part of the Tosafot says, no, you don't have to make Aliyah anymore because it's just too dangerous to go to Israel. The other opinion, Rabbeinu Chaim, is it's not that it's sakana, it's a different reason. There's just so many mitzvot you have to do in Israel, and we're going to mess up. So why should we put ourselves in such a situation? Very interesting perspective. And we're going to come back to all these. Third statement, Dama Rav Yehuda. Now this is another Gemara that gets quoted all the time, and this pasuk in Yirmiyahu gets quoted from the Gemara. Rav Yehuda said, Kol ha'oleh mi Bavel Eretz Yisrael over ba'aseh. Whoever makes aliyah from Babylonia, which is where the Jews were in exile, it's used as the example of what Chutz La'aretz is. He is committing a sin. He's going against the Mitzvat Aseh, a positive commandment. What's the commandment? Which does not exist in the Torah, by the way. It's in Navi. Shenemar, it says in Sefer Yirmiyahu, Hashem said, Bavel yuva'u, you shall come to Bavel, to Babylonia, v'shama yiyu, and there you will remain, ad yom pokdi otam u'mashem, until I tell you it's time to leave, until I bring Mashiach, until I bring a salvation, until I give you a sign that it's time to make aliyah. Nope, you don't have to go. This Gemara is quoted all the time in the name of Rav Yehuda, that is saying you're not allowed to make aliyah. Matter of fact, now you're not allowed to make aliyah. You have to stay in Chutz La'aretz. Gemara continues on Kuf Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph, and mentions something that some of you may have heard of and maybe not. I have to just tell you what this is. It's known as the Shalosh Shavuot. By the way, Shlosha Shavuot means 3 weeks. Shalosh Shavuot means 3 promises or 3 oaths. There is a Gemara, again in Ketubot, that quotes a pasuk from Shira Shirim, Song of Songs. It says as follows: I cause you to give an oath, daughters of Jerusalem, And then the Gemara expands on what does this mean when Shirim is talking about these oaths. Shalosh Shavuot Lama. What were these 3 oaths that Bnei Yisrael supposedly took? Achat, 1. Shalo Ya'alu Yisrael b'choma. They can't make mass aliyah. You can't have hundreds of thousands of people making aliyah at one time. That's the first promise. Second promise. Achat, Shishbiya Kadosh Baruch Hu et Yisrael Shalo Yembedu be'umot. Second one is that the Jews will not rebel against the nations of the world, meaning if the nations of the world don't enable, allow, permit the Jews to go back to Israel, they can't go. Third one, Shakadosh Baruch Hu Hishbia et Ahuvdei Kochavim, that God made the non-Jews swear that they're not going to be subjugate the Jews too much. These are known as the Shalosh Shavuot. Take an average, and I'm going to use the term right now because unfortunately it does fall into a large percentage of our Haredi brethren in the United States and other countries that will quote this. Will say, we can't make aliyah. What are you talking about? The Shalosh Shavuot. There's 3 oaths. Our forefathers took an oath. They're not going to make aliyah b'choma. They're not going to oath a lot of people at one time. That unless the nations of the world permit it, we can't do it. And besides, that the Goyim aren't, we have it pretty good here. It's not bad. Mamdani is only going to bring the Sharia law to only part of the state of New York. That's fine. Don't worry about it. What does this mean? Shelo Ya'alu Yisrael b'choma. Rashi said, Yachad b'yad chazakat. They will not come as a large group of people with strength, meaning sheyesh isur aliyah la'aretz yachtav u'b'choach. For this, what it apparently looks like is that there is a prohibition of making aliyah as a large amount of people and by force. Next comment, next one. This is another thing that people quote all the time. Harambam. The Rambam in Sefer Mitzvot, before the Rambam's magnum opus of the Yad HaChazakah, 14 volumes of the first, if you've been in the Jewish history class, you also may know this, remember this, one of the first attempts to codify Jewish law, and it also covers everything, including the times of the Beit HaMikdash and other things. The Rambam before that had an introduction called the Sefer HaMitzvot. The Sefer HaMitzvot lists all the mitzvot the Rambam believes are in the Torah. What I mean believes, there are different opinions of what's considered a mitzvah, what's not. Everyone agrees on probably 95%. But there's a book called the Sefer Mitzvot Gadol, Sefer Mitzvot Katan. It's not worth going to what they mean right now. But different opinions of what these mitzvot, the mitzvot of the 6, everyone agrees on the number 613. It's just, what are they? So the Rambam Sefer Mitzvot, there's a problem. If Aliyah is a mitzvah, it's not listed. The Rambam doesn't mention anywhere that it's a mitzvah to make Aliyah. Not only that, here comes the kicker for the negative opinion. There's a commentary on the Rambam called the Megillat Esther. Megillat Esther explains his opinion as to why the Rambam does not include the mitzvah of making Aliyah. Nireli, it appears to me, Kima shelo mena'ah harav, the reason that the Rav, meaning the Rambam, did not count Aliyah as a mitzvah, ulefisha mitzvat yerushat haaretz v'shivatat, because that the mitzvah of acquiring the land, settling the land, lo nahagarak b'mei ela b'mei Moshe v'Yoshua v'David, that the mitzvah to actually, in other words, if you look in Tanakh, there's a mitzvah that they're told they're supposed to go, they're supposed to inherit the land. He says that only applied in the times of Moshe, Yehoshua, and David. And until they were sent into exile. So basically, from the time of Moshe until the time of the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, when they're sent into Galut, there was a mitzvah to settle the land. But after that, after they were forced out of their land, after they were sent into Galut or exile, ein mitzvah zo noheget, this mitzvah doesn't apply to Dorot for future generations. When? Ad bo HaMashiach. Until Mashiach comes. Hence, you will have people saying, Aliyah, Israel's a nice place to visit. Very nice, beautiful place. I might even own an apartment there. Very nice. But we have absolutely no reason to go. Megillas Esther, Rambam, nothing in the Rambam about it. Megillat Esther says, no, it's a mitzvah only when the Mashiach comes. You see? That's what it is. Ad kan, up to this point, the negative. These are the reasons a person, now if you stop this, if you're listening now and you decide to hang up or to go offline, or you listen to this on tape later and you decide, no, that's the end of the share, I don't want to hear anymore, then you will be left with a situation that I can call the, what is it? Oh my gosh, my mind just went blank. What's his name? Yeah, it'll come to me. Forget it. I'm not going to get to it. If it pops in my head, I'll bring it back. Now we're going to look at positives. Now, what does that mean, the positives? We just saw the negatives. Why not? Why not? Why not? Now, the positives can't just be, oh, yeah, of course we have to. You not only have to prove that you're right, you also have to negate what they said. In other words, these, the Gemara and Ketubot, Rabbeinu Chaim and Tosfot, Rav Yehuda, the statement of the Megillat Esther, the Rambam doesn't include it. Now we have to go into that. In the Rambam, it says clearly, he does, in fact, quote the halacha that we started with in the very beginning. He says, man wants to make aliyah, she doesn't. Or she wants to, and he doesn't. Then we can force it. Not only that, he also, remember, he does with halachot that have nothing to do with even modern times. When he talks about this concept of an eved, or Jewish slave. Eved shama lalot Eretz Yisrael. An eved that says, I want to make aliyah, a servant, a slave, who, in quotes, a Jewish slave, wants to make aliyah. If the eved wants to make aliyah, we would force the master to make aliyah with the eved and take him along. V'din ze b'chol zman, afilu b'zman hazeh sha'aretz b'yad akub. The Rambam says clearly that this mitzvah, that the eved or the wife or the husband, whoever is driving force behind aliyah, the other one has to go along with that. And the mitzvah applies when? All times, even nowadays, when the land is in the hands of the non-Jews. He doesn't list aliyah is a mitzvah. We're going to have to discuss that soon. But he does imply it clearly at this point. And some people might say, yeah, that may not be even strong enough. Fine, hang in there. We're getting to it. The Rambam in Hilchot Shabbat tells us another thing. Now, years and years and years ago, when I heard this for the first time, I was really pleasantly surprised at this Rambam. I had not come across it yet in my Rambam learning. I have since. He says as follows. What happens if you decide you wanted to buy a piece of land in Israel? A house, a plot of land, whatever it might be. And the situation is the owner says, listen, here's the deal. Tomorrow at noon, you're signing and that's it. We're done. This is absolutely it. Just so happens tomorrow's Shabbat. What are you supposed to do? You're going to buy a piece of land, or a house rather in this case, from a non-Jew in Israel. The Jew is allowed to tell a non-Jew, you can tell the non-Jew to write the document and sign it on your behalf with your permission on Shabbat. Why? Because asking a non-Jew to do something for you on Shabbat is prohibited from rabbinic level. Mishum Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. But when it comes to settling the land of Israel, even one house at a time, lo gazu b'davar hazeh. What does that mean? They didn't make it the gzera, the prohibition of asking a non-Jew to do stuff for you doesn't apply. Why? Because Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is a doraita level, it's a biblical level of requirement. Again, he's telling us, but seemingly only by implication, that mitzvat Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is a mitzvah from the Torah. We still have to go further in the Rambam, though. Let me just close this and start with another part here. And we're going to go back to, let me move you over to this slide. So if all these mitzvot, all of these comments, the Rambam, point to the Rambam that he held that aliyah is a mitzvah, why is it not listed in Sefer HaMitzvot? Remember, I told you the Sefer HaMitzvot is an individual. It's usually, most of the Rambams have it at the beginning of the book, and then they print the rest of the book, of the next 14 volumes, of all the halachot, of all the rules and all. But Sefer HaMitzvot is just number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, with no expansion on it. So why is it not listed in the Sefer HaMitzvot? So it's a very strong question. right? It's a very strong question that we're going to see a couple of very good answers to right now. Let me go to the next slide. Okay, start with Rav Kook. Rav Kook and the Avnei Nezer, similar ideas, but we're going to start with Rav Kook. And they're not the only ones that say this. שהסביר זאת על פי הרמב"ם בשורש הרביעי שכתב שאינו מונה מצוות כלליות. I think that should be Ramban. Hold on. Let me see. I think it's the Ramban, not Rambam. Okay. No, sorry. The Rambam in his own, the Rambam had to set up rules, so to speak. What will he include in the list of the mitzvot of the Torah? So he said in rule number 4, he writes, Shekatav she'eno moneh mitzvot klaliyot. He does not include a mitzvah that's a general, inclusive mitzvah. We're going to see what that means in a minute. Mitzvat Yishuv Eretz Yisrael zo mitzvah klalit. And mitzvah of making aliyah is a mitzvah klalit, or a general umbrella mitzvah. What does this mean? V'nireh shekavanat harav lomar achat mishtayim. O sheza mitzvah shemichila betocha mitzvot rabot. What does it mean, says Rav Kook, that he calls aliyah an umbrella kind of mitzvah? Either it means it has many, many mitzvot involved in it. Hainu kol mitzvot hatluyot ba'aretz. For example, Shemitah and Trumot and Masrot and Bikurim and Maser Sheni and Maser Netarvai, all those, that could be one thing. Or shekavanato af yoter mikach. Or maybe his meaning when he said he doesn't include anything that's a mitzvah klalit, like mitzvat Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, means kedivrei Ramban, as Ramban says, sheikar hamitzvot kulo ba'aretz. The Ramban has a very charif, very sharp statement he makes, which is that the main place for mitzvot to be done is the land of Israel. Like Rashi says in Dvarim, and go down to here. Af lachar shetigalu hayu mitzuyanim bemitzvot hinichu tefillin asim mezuzah kedei shelo yu alechem chadashim keshetechazru. What's his last line mean? The Ramban tells us that the mitzvot are made for us to keep in the land of Israel. Wait a minute. So what about people chutz la'aretz? He seems to imply that doing the mitzvot, like putting on tefillin, putting on mezuzot, and everything else, is that we'll know how to do it when we get to the land of Israel. So Rav Kook is telling us, and others, that Rambam considers the idea of mitzvah Yishuv Eretz Yisrael as an all-encompassing mitzvah. He does, and we're going to see in the next slide in a minute, in the name of someone called the Avnei Nezer, that it's a little bit even more, he can be more specific. For example, let's just look at the other slide before I give the example. Avnei Nezer, his commentary on Yoredea, says as follows: Shemitzvat Yishuv Eretz Yisrael klalua b'mitzvat hacharim tacharimem. That there's a general mitzvah to conquer the land of Israel. Because the conquering, the settling of the land is in and of itself a part of the mitzvah of conquering the land. Because when the Bnei Yisrael came in to the land of Israel, and they were able to, the beginning of Sefer Yoshua, and wipe out the 7 nations living here, mashlimim otam. Let me go down here. Okay. Ha'im lemanot rak et hamitzvah klalit kedat Rambam shlo mana asiyat aron bekaporet v'fi she'en klulim b'mitzvot asiyat hamishkan. I'll translate this all in a minute. U'shema yesh limnot kol echad lechut kedat Rambam shemana mitzvot elu b'nifrad. Says, what does the Rambam do? The Rambam did not, when it talked about the Mishkan, it didn't give individual comments about, okay, this is how you make the kaporet, this is how you make the aron, this is how you make this is how he gave a general statement about the Mishkan. So the same way that the Rambam gave a general rule about the Mishkan and didn't give the details, when he did, okay, I had this backwards. Hold on, keep it here. When the Rambam gives us certain individual mitzvot or ideas, he doesn't go ahead and tell us the mitzvah, for example, of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, because it would be almost attached to every single mitzvah. Why? If the understanding is that the mitzvot have to be done, the best place to do them is Israel. You say, okay, you have to keep Shabbat, keep it in Israel. You have to make sure you take the Lulav and Torah, do it in Israel. When blow shofar, blow it in Israel. No, he says, Abnei Nezer and Rav Kook and others, it's a general mitzvah. It's part and parcel of the mitzvah. I'll give you a poor example, but the Rambam doesn't say that when you blow the shofar, don't forget to blow into it. Why? Because that's how you blow it. That's how a shofar is. That's part of the mitzvah. It's part of, you can't just wave it and hope the wind is going to go through it. It doesn't work that way. So where are we holding right now? Let's get something else here on my screen. Just a second. We have shown now that the reason that the Rambam apparently does not include the mitzvah of Aliyah to Israel as a separate mitzvah is because it's called a mitzvah klalit, a general mitzvah, that so many things need to be done here that it's part and parcel of every mitzvah. He does implication within the actual halachic work he has in multiple places. We saw 3, that the mitzvah is min haTorah to make Aliyah. Doesn't say anything about Mashiach, doesn't say anything about the Shalosh Shavuot. We haven't talked about that yet. We're going to get to that now. But right now, we just put aside the Rambam. What about Rav Yehuda? Rav Yehuda said that, Mishko said that anybody who makes Aliyah is over naseh. Let me just get it in front of me here. Just a minute. I'm not going to put the slide back up. I want to re-quote him though. Whoever makes Aliyah, who comes from Bavel, generally mean Babylonia, but really in general, Chutz La'aretz, is going against the Torah because it says, it's actually not the Torah, it's a pasuk in Yirmiyahu, that you have to stay in Bavel until Hashem comes to redeem you from there. Okay, that's the statement of Rav Yehuda. So how do we work with that? So on the one hand, there are those who simply say the halacha is not in accordance with Rav Yehuda. There's a commentary on the Pe'ata Shulchan. The rest of these comments I'm going to read, but I don't have it on slides. He says as follows: Shekol ha'amorim she'alu la'Eretz Yisrael chalku al Rav Yehuda. You had in the time of Rav Yehuda, well, he lived in the time of the Amoraim. That's the time. That's the generation after the time of the Tanaim. The Tanaim are the time of the Mishnah, which started around the year 200. From the year 200 to 500 of the Common Era is the time of the Amoraim. Many people moved from Bavel to Israel. Hence, we also have the Talmud Yerushalmi, which is really written in Tiberia, which we talked about in the Jewish history class. But he says, so many people in the time of Rav Yehuda made Aliyah, v'chein halacha shelo ke Rav Yehuda, and he paskined the halacha is not like Rav Yehuda. In addition to that, the Avnei Nezer, who I quoted before, says as follows: Hakadosh Baruch Hu potech befanenu et haderech. Hashem Himself opened up the way for us, kedei shenuchal la'alot, so that we can make Aliyah. V'noten biyadenu lahakim medina bayuchal kol Yehudi la'alot la'aretz, who gave us the opportunity to be able to make Aliyah, to build a state of our own, and Jews to make Israel, l'lo kshayim, with no problems. Hayesh yom pekida gadol mizeh. Is there anything, a greater sign from God that now is the time that we should be making Aliyah? What is he saying? What the statement Rabbi Yehuda made in the Mishnah, in the Gemara was, no, you can't make Aliyah. Why? Pasuk. You are stuck in Galut until I send you the sign. It's time to redeem you. Comes along the Avnei Nezer and says, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you people? He's talking to everybody right now, nowadays. You have an opportunity. This is before Nefesh B'Nefesh. We have a state. We have a government. For the first time in a little less than 2,000 years, we're autonomous. And he says, is there any greater sign from Hashem that it's time to come home? What about Rabbeinu Chaim? Rabbeinu Chaim said, no mitzvah. No mitzvah. You know why not mitzvah to go? Too many mitzvot to do in Israel. It's just too much for us. We can't handle that. Well, that alone is a problematic one. But there's a posek known as the Maharit. Maharit said as follows: V'hagahat talmidhi v'lav asmachtahi klal. Maharit says it's an absolute, in the Tosfot, where Rabbeinu Chaim said, it's not a good idea, it's too much to do, much work, is an absolute error. It's a mistake. Maybe there was no even Rabbeinu Chaim to say such a thing. That's his opinion, that it's just, you can't rely on that statement. It's just some Talmud, meaning a student of one of the Balei Tosafot, wrote it in there and somehow came down to us generation after generation. In addition to that, I'm going to read something to you, that the reason that Rabbeinu Chaim said what he said, which is, it's too much to do, too many mitzvot, and we're going to mess up, and we're going to get all kind of onashim, that today that he said there's no reason to make aliyah. Ha'im ma'alat Eretz Yisrael hi narak biglal mitzvot hatluyot ba'aretz, v'adai she'ma'alata hi gam ma'ala atzma'it. Meaning, I don't remember, I didn't put down my source for this, the statement, which means, you think the only reason to make aliyah is just to do mitzvot hatluyot ba'aretz, just to do shmita and trumot and masrot and all these things? That's the only reason? What about the ma'alah, the benefit of individuality, of independence, being able to live in your own land and have your own country and to make your own rules and everything? The Gemara, which said that an eved, a slave, can force his master to make aliyah, what does that have to do with mitzvot hatluyot ba'aretz? What does that have to do with shmita? What does it do with trumot masrot? The eved doesn't have a part in the land himself. He can't own land. So when the Rambam makes a statement and quotes a Gemara that makes a statement that an eved, a slave, can force his master to make aliyah, it has nothing to do with mitzvot hatluyot ba'aretz, or the land-based mitzvot. So again, Rabbeinu Chaim is zeroed out in this. Not one posek quotes Rabbeinu Chaim as halacha, meaning not the Rambam, not the Shulchan Aruch, not the Tur, I know those are the historical order, not the Rif. Nobody quotes the Rabbeinu Chaim that says, no, we don't have to make aliyah because too much work, too many mitzvot to do there, which makes it even more logical to say that very likely it was just someone who kind of put in an addendum to this Tosfot, that instead of it just being, it's dangerous on the roads, that no, we can't go because it's too many mitzvot. What about the Shalosh Shvuot? I don't remember the year it was. I'm sure some of you would know. Rabbi Yosef Dov Alevi Soloveitchik, known as the Rav, gave us a series of speeches, and among them was Kol Dodi Dofek. My beloved is knocking. It was about Aliyah. It was about Israel. And he discussed this very topic of the Shalosh Shvuot. What I'm going to say now isn't what necessarily he said, but it was found within the words he said, and you'll find this among many other comments as well. That the Shalosh Shavuot have been nullified for multiple reasons. Start with the third one. The third one was that the non-Jewish world took an oath on their behalf and their descendants that they would not subjugate the Jews too much. So let's see. Okay, Jews are kicked out of England, they're kicked out of Spain, they're kicked out of Portugal, they're slaughtered in Germany. They have nullified they're part of the deal. They're part of the shvuah. The oath is gone out the window. That's one. Number two, what says that you're not allowed to go bechoma. Rashi says without reshut, and couldn't go beyachad and couldn't bechaz, like to force your way. We received, today the United Nations would never, not a snowball's chance, the United Nations would ever vote to partition what was known as Palestine at the time in 1947, to give Jews land that would be theirs and the Arabs land that would be theirs. But when they did do that back then, they received quote unquote permission from the United Nations, in spite of the fact that the Arabs didn't want us there either. And then, of course, we know that led to lots of problems. As Rav Kook writes the following: Ki kinyan kibush milchama oset kovesh ladon haaretz. When a person conquers a land, they are now the masters of that land. And when it came to these countries in the United Nations who rejected it, that were against the Jews being there to establish a country, but as far as law was concerned, both Jewish and international, they were a zero. They don't count. Al pi hatakanon shel based on the actual rules and regulations, back then at least, of the United Nations, that a conquering nation took the land. So when they were split and the Jews were, so to speak, able to conquer the land by that point, it was our land. The Shalosh Shavuot, if they were applicable, would be somewhere. You'd see them in the Rambam, you'd see them in the Shulchan Aruch, but no, they're nowhere. Not only that, there is evidence throughout the Gemara and the Poskim that exactly the opposite. I'll give you a couple of examples or statements, and I'll translate them. Person who lives in Israel is considered to be living without sin. That one needs a lot of explanation. I'm not going to get into that. But there is an interesting statement the Gemara makes. Let's say you have a choice. A person can make Aliyah and live in a community that is not the most Torah-based community. Not only that, it might even be a community that is filled with people who worship Avodah Zarah. That's your one choice. The other choice is you stay in Chutz La'aretz, and you can live in Lakewood, you can live in Chicago, in Los Angeles, and other places in New York, and you can live with all the kollalim you want. That's your choice. Live with Ovdei Avodah Zarah, idolaters in Israel, in some community, or live with all the shuls and the kosher bakeries and butchers and everything else, and live a life of Rileys, they say. Gemara says you should better choose to live with idolaters in the land of Israel than you should live with your fellow Jews in Chutz La'aretz. Nobody, not one posek in the Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam, the Tur, the Rif, nobody says, well, we have to wait for Mashiach to come. That's a cop-out. It's a cop-out. I have a friend who I grew up with that I still in touch with till today, who I don't want to give too much information, so I don't want to identify who it is. You wouldn't know him anyways. I asked him a question one time. At that time, the person was in Agudat Yisrael, Agudat Israel in the United States. One of the top rabbanim in the country in the United States was Rabbi X. And I said to him, what would happen if one day he actually said, you know what? Yalla. It's a mitzvah min Torah. It's a mitzvah chiyuvit. We started this whole topic tonight by talking the difference between chiyuvit and kiyumit. Mitzvah chiyuvit means it's something you have to do, just like putting on tefillin, just like keeping Shabbat, just like other things. What would happen if the Rav would say something that to the Agudat Yisrael people? His response, I heard word for word, he said we would have a not a riot. Basically, he said, I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember the words he used. It would cause a tremendous amount of problems. What does that mean? It means that when people hear that it's a mitzvah that you have to do it, from a person who they believed all along says, no, you wait till Mashiach comes. If he were to say that, and it's an actually mitzvah, and the Rambam includes this mitzvah klalit, and the Ramban talks about it, and Rav Kook, and all these other poskim over the centuries, and they say, you know what, they're right. They are right. We're supposed to make aliyah. People will still find reasons to not. Now, there are definitely legitimate reasons for people to not make aliyah. I used to be, many years ago, of the mind, there's really no reason a person should not make aliyah. I definitely changed my mind over the years. But there's a very big difference between a person who says, the Shalosh Shavuot, Rabbeinu Chaim, the Tosot, the Gemara Babel Yuvu, blah, 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 and not has it on their radar at all, versus, I know I should make aliyah. That's one step at least. I really can't. I love it here. It's great. The life in Chutz La'aretz is wonderful, especially now it's going to be in New York City, especially in London, especially in Toronto. Just look how fantastic it is for Jews now in these cities. It's unbelievably great. Note the sense of sarcasm. But that's at least a step. But for so many Jews, religious, observant Jews who say "B'techazeh neinenu" every day, these and other psukim, it ends up becoming a statement of it's good for them. It's good for them. I'm not. I'm happy here. I quoted recently in one of these classes, I don't remember which one. I'm going to close with this quote also because it resonates tremendously to this very day. Some of you that are online right now were in the class when I gave it many years ago on Kuzari. when the Kuzari, the king of the Khazars, is searching for a religion to convert all of his people. His people were all idolaters. He's looking for religion. He invites it sounds like the beginning of a joke, a priest, an imam, a philosopher, and a rabbi to talk about their religions. And the vast majority of the book deals with the Jewish perspective of life and halakha and everything. In the middle, supposedly in the middle of this whole discussion over the time period that he had with the rabbi, he converts his people to Judaism. It's fascinating sefer if you've never learned it. You can't read it. You have to learn it. It's a big difference. Anyways, so in Ma'amar Bet, in the second essay, in the paragraph 25, the king turns to the rabbi and basically says the following. You know, it's interesting you say all this stuff about that you say in your prayers that you want to see God's return to Zion and that you will face Jerusalem to pray. And you say your prayer after meals about Israel, and he quotes a whole list of things that you say that about Israel. Yet you're here in Chutz La'aretz. Why aren't you there? And he starts with two words that are burned in my mind. Hovashtani hamelech. You have embarrassed me, meaning you're so right. And he says that most of the people, their tefillah is ketziftzuf hazarzir, which means like the twittering of birds. I mean, they're reading the words and not necessarily feeling. I cannot ever, and I will not ever, say about a person who doesn't make aliyah, you know, they're wrong, and I can understand the perspective of a person saying, I don't want to. Okay, I understand that. I still think they belong here, but I can understand it. Person says there's no mitzvah. They pull the religion card. So there's no mitzvah to be in Israel because, again, quote all these quotes I gave you before. Ask them if they've ever asked a Shiloh. If they ever went to their Rav, you know, well, they won't because their Rav is going to give them the same answer because that's why they're their Rav. But if they would, they're going to ask if they put their milk, they open their dishwasher that's Bisari and they see a milchik spoon, they're going to run and ask, what do I do? What do I do? But did you ever ask a Shiloh, actual question, halachically, do I have to make aliyah? Do I have a reason of Torah? Do I have a reason that I'm exempt from making aliyah? Do they ever ask it? The answer is no. The answer is no. 95% of the time. On the other hand, there are people who can't, dealing with an aging parent, medical issues of their own. There are reasons. Of course, there are some reasons. But my personal beef is with two types. Number one, the people who see the horrific things going on right now. That it's, and I've said this within my own family, that it's too bad we don't have something in recent history to kind of compare to of how things can get really bad for the Jews. If we only had something maybe 70, 80 years ago that we could have looked back at and said, wow, things are happening now. So it's like a mental block when it comes to history. And in the others, I say it's the ones who it's not on their radar at all. It's not religious. It's not just not on the radar at all. And by the way, I'm sure you know the statistics are the majority of religious Jews have never been to Israel. Majority have never been to Israel. So we don't have to wait for Mashiach. A person should, in my humble opinion, listen to the Rambam, listen to all the different other statements that have been eradicated over the years, that the Shalosh Shavuot went out the window, so you can never use that. The Rabbeinu Chaim is a zero, not him, Chas v'shalom, but the statement that he made is either considered a misprint or someone who just added something in. No one paskins like that. No one makes the law halacha of that at all. The statement that Tosfot makes, it's dangerous. Yes, back then it was dangerous. And maybe in his time, and go back 1,000 years ago, to make Aliyah was extremely dangerous, not just the actual travel, but actually being in the land of Israel. So maybe you have a Torah, maybe you had. But now, in many situations, in many communities, being in Chutz La'aretz is very dangerous. So my words that anyone will hear me who's not here right now yet, or families of people outside of Israel who are here in Israel, that have family here, is at least start a discussion. Try, think about it, put on your radar. There's Nefesh B'Nefesh is going right now, even as we speak. Have a series of events in different cities in the United States. And there's just so much information you have out there. I'm happy to talk to anybody who's interested in Aliyah, and especially those who are against it. I'm more than happy to talk to them as well. But it should be on everyone's radar, at least bare minimum. That's the right thing to do. Okay, I think I have exhausted my commentary right now, and I will just say that thank you very much. Bezrat Hashem, we have Thursday Pirkei Avot, Sunday and Tuesday we have class, and then I'm going to be away for a bit. So